StoryLearning Press presents 101 Conversations in Simple Italian, short natural dialogues to boost your confidence and improve your spoken Italian. By Olly Richards, read by David McNeill and Marco Soldà. Introduction. If you've ever tried speaking Italian with a stranger, chances are it wasn't easy. You might have felt tongue-tied when you tried to recall words or verb conjugations. You might have struggled to keep up in the conversation, with Italian words flying at you at 100 miles per hour. Indeed, many students report feeling so overwhelmed with the experience of speaking Italian in the real world that they struggle to maintain motivation. The problem lies with the way Italian is usually taught. Textbooks and language classes break Italian down into rules and other nuggets of information in order to make it easier to learn. But that can leave you with a bit of a shock when you come to actually speak Italian out in the real world. People don't speak like they do in my textbook. That's why I wrote this book. 101 Conversations in Simple Italian prepares you to speak Italian in the real world. Unlike the contrived and unnatural dialogues in your textbook, the 101 authentic conversations in this book offer you simple but authentic spoken Italian, which you can study away from the pressure of face-to-face conversations. The conversations in this book tell the story of 6 people in a fictional town in Italy. You'll experience the story by following the conversations the characters have with one another. Written entirely in spoken Italian, the conversations give you the authentic experience of reading real Italian in a format that is convenient and accessible for a beginner. A2 on the Common European Framework of Reference. The extensive story-based format of the book helps you get used to spoken Italian in a natural way, with the words and phrases you see gradually emerging in your own spoken Italian, as you learn them naturally through your reading. The book is packed with engaging learning material, including short dialogues that you can finish in one sitting, helpful English definitions of difficult words, scene-setting introductions to each chapter to help you follow along, and a story that will have you gripped until the end. These learning features allow you to learn and absorb new words and phrases, and then activate them, so that you can remember and use them in your own spoken Italian over time. You'll never find another way to get so much practice with real, spoken Italian. Suitable for beginners and intermediate learners alike, 101 Conversations in Simple Italian is the perfect complement to any Italian course and will give you the ultimate head start for using Italian confidently in the real world. Whether you're new to Italian and looking for an entertaining challenge, or you have been learning for a while and want to take your speaking to the next level, this book is the biggest step forward you will take in your Italian this year. If you're ready, let's get started. How to use this book. There are many possible ways to use a resource such as this, which is written entirely in Italian. In this section, I would like to offer my suggestions for using this book effectively, based on my experience with thousands of students and their struggles. There are 2 main ways to work with content in a foreign language. 1. Intensively. 2. Extensively. Intensive learning is when you examine the material in great detail, seeking to understand all the content, the meaning of vocabulary, the use of grammar, the pronunciation of difficult words, etc. You will typically spend much longer with each section and therefore cover less material overall. The traditional classroom learning generally involves intensive learning. Extensive learning is the opposite of intensive. To learn extensively is to treat the material for what it is, not as the object of language study, but rather as content to be enjoyed and appreciated. To read a book for pleasure is an example of extensive reading. As such, the aim is not to stop and study the language that you find, but rather to read and complete the book. There are pros and cons to both modes of study, and indeed you may use a combination of both in your approach. However, the default mode for most people is to study intensively. This is because there is the inevitable temptation to investigate anything you do not understand in the pursuit of progress and hope to eliminate all mistakes. Traditional language education trains us to do this. Similarly, it is not obvious to many readers how extensive study can be effective. The uncertainty and ambiguity can be uncomfortable. There's so much I don't understand. In my experience, people have a tendency to drastically overestimate what they can learn from intensive study and drastically underestimate what they can learn from extensive study. My observations are as follows. Intensive learning. Although it is intuitive to try to learn something you don't understand, such as a new word, there is no guarantee you will actually manage to learn it. Indeed, you will be familiar with the feeling of trying to learn a new word, only to forget it shortly afterwards. Studying intensively is also time-consuming, meaning you can't cover as much material. Extensive learning. By contrast, when you study extensively, you cover huge amounts of material and give yourself exposure to much more content in the language that you otherwise would. In my view, this is the primary benefit of extensive learning. Given the immense size of the task of learning a foreign language, extensive learning is the only way to give yourself the exposure to the language that you need in order to stand a chance of acquiring it. You simply can't learn everything you need in the classroom. When put like this, extensive learning may sound quite compelling. However, there is an obvious objection. But how do I learn when I'm not looking up or memorizing things? This is an understandable doubt if you are used to a traditional approach to language study. However, the truth is that you can learn an extraordinary amount passively as you read and listen to the language, but only if you give yourself the opportunity to do so. Remember, you learned your mother tongue passively. There is no reason you shouldn't do the same with a second language. When you learn languages extensively, here are some of the characteristics of this mode of study. Aim for completion. When you read material in a foreign language, your first job is to make your way through from beginning to end. Read to the end of the chapter or listen to the entire audio without worrying about things you don't understand. Set your sights on the finish line and don't get distracted. This is a vital behavior to foster because it trains you to enjoy the material before you start to get lost in details. This is how you read or listen to things in your native language, so it's the perfect thing to aim for. Read for gist. The most effective way to make headway through a piece of content in another language is to ask yourself, can I follow the gist of what's going on? You don't need to understand every word, just the main ideas. If you can, that's enough. You're set. You can understand and enjoy a great amount with gist alone, so carry on through the material and enjoy the feeling of making progress. If the material is so hard that you struggle to understand even the gist, then my advice for you would be to consider easier material. Don't look up words. As tempting as it is to look up new words, doing so robs you of time that you could spend reading the material. In the extreme, you can spend so long looking up words that you literally never finish what you're reading. If you come across a word you don't understand, don't worry. Keep calm and carry on. Focus on the goal of reaching the end of the chapter. You'll probably see that difficult word again soon, and you might guess the meaning in the meantime. Don't analyze grammar. Similarly to new words, if you stop to study verb tenses or verb conjugations as you go, you'll never make any headway with the material. Try to notice the grammar that's being used. Make a mental note and carry on. Have you spotted some unfamiliar grammar? No problem, it can wait. Unfamiliar grammar rarely prevents you from understanding the gist of a passage, but can completely derail your reading if you insist on looking up and studying every grammar point you encounter. After a while, you'll be surprised how this difficult grammar starts to become normal. You don't understand? Don't worry. The feeling you often have when you are engaged in extensive learning is, I don't understand. You may find an entire paragraph that you don't understand, or that you find confusing. So what's the best response? Spend the next hour trying to decode that difficult paragraph? Or continue reading regardless? Hint, it's the latter. When you read in your mother tongue, you will often skip entire paragraphs you find boring, so there's no need to feel guilty about doing the same when reading Italian. Skipping difficult passages of text may feel like cheating, but in fact, it can be a mature approach to reading that allows you to make progress through the material and ultimately learn more. If you follow this mindset when you read Italian, you will be training yourself to be a strong, independent Italian learner who doesn't have to rely on a teacher or rulebook to make progress and enjoy learning. As you will have noticed, this approach draws on the fact that your brain can learn many things naturally without conscious study. This is something that we appear to have forgotten with the formalization of the education system, but speak to any accomplished language learner and they will confirm that their proficiency in languages comes not from their ability to memorize grammar rules, but the time they spend reading, listening to, and speaking the language, enjoying the process, and integrating it into their lives. So, I encourage you to embrace extensive learning.
Speriamo che questa anteprima ti sia piaciuta. Per continuare ad ascoltare questo audiolibro su Google Play Libri, utilizza il link nella descrizione del video.